My name is Megan Kilo, and I am in content strategy. My role in the world of the web is to go into companies and talk about how their content can support their business goals. So that's the lens that I'm coming from with this presentation. And looking around the room, I just want to get a quick show of hands. How many people here are developers? Okay, good. How many people here deal with CMSs in their daily lives? Okay. That's also good. I'm excited to talk to you people. So, like I said, I'm in content strategy. So, in my world, the definition of content is really important. And so I'm going to throw this out there so that we're all on the same page as we move through this presentation. So I'm going to use this word a lot. It's really important in a content management system. And basically, everything is content. This is our text, our video, our images, everything that we communicate is content. So when we're talking about managing that, a lot of times we're thinking about words, and that is the majority of our content does come out in word format, but there is a lot more to it than words. So I just show that statement out there. And our content is facing a problem. We have new devices coming out all the time. We are, in addition to shipments of smartphones and tablets exceeding that of personal computers in 2011, we have 5.3 billion mobile subscribers worldwide. That's 77% of the world population. We have 60% of the activities that are occurring on mobile are new activities. People are doing new things that we can't anticipate. And there are new devices coming out constantly on top of all of this. This is just the tip of the iceberg. We can't predict what's coming out in the future, and this is becoming a big problem for us because, as we know, every platform has unique content needs. People interact differently with a mobile app than they do with a tablet, than they do with a mobile website, than they do with a desktop website. There's different display issues. As you can see, this is Apple, and I know we all like to laud Apple for all the wonderful things it does, but it doesn't do mobile well. They've taken a website-shaped blog, and they've stuck it into mobile. And as you can see, this doesn't work. When that's in the palm of your hand, that text is not readable. So we need to rethink content for each new device that comes out. We need to rethink how we're displaying our information, the structures that it's taking, how people are going to navigate to our site. And right now, we don't have the best means to do that. We have our content management system create websites. We create browser-based websites. And then we put this layer of plugins on top. And those plugins mash up the website and spit out mobile. And then mash it up and spit out an app. And then mash it up and spit out a tablet. And that yellow layer of mashing, that requires man-hours. We're tweaking text. We are adjusting display. We're going through and figuring out what content should go where, reestablishing hierarchies. This is a very time-intensive process right now, and it's not sustainable. And Ethan Marcotte is another name in content. These people are talking about how we can't afford to be spending time continually reshaping our content to fit these new devices. So we've come up with responsive. And responsive design does solve a number of these problems. Responsive design adjusts your display as you shift, and this is an example of a responsive site. It answers the problem of pixels. It displays well on different devices. So it's not going to send your phone a picture larger than your phone can handle. That's the goal of responsive. It can also suppress content or move content around. But that's about all it can do in terms of solving the content problem. So we can say, all right, this content can go away when it gets to this 900 some pixels. But then we don't have an intelligent way to change that content. We can basically only hide it. So it's a part of the solution, but it's not all. And again, another quote. Anne Rockley is she's been talking about this issue for a long time. She's a great resource. I have resources at the end of my presentation. What all these solutions mean for developers and for people who are making these platforms is that we're doing a lot of retrofitting. We're running around at the back end of our project, and we're trying to figure out how can we get what we have to fit this new device. We're chasing each other, we're disconnected, and often we have non-authors making decisions about content. And I'm seeing head nods, you guys are familiar, and these are not decisions that developers are qualified to make. Sorry. But there's this disconnect. There is a disconnect in what we need and what we're capable of right now. So I'm imagining a future in which our system can build content that can travel anywhere. And not only can it travel anywhere that it needs to go now, but anywhere it needs to go in the future. And we, instead of taking content at the back end and refitting it and putting it someplace else, we build content that has instructions about how to handle it right in the content itself, so that your platforms can come in and they know exactly what to do with it because the content tells them what to do. Instead of building containers, instead of saying, we have a browser, now we put stuff into it. We have a mobile site, now we put stuff into it. We build content that's like water and can inhabit all of these different containers in its own way because it is so fluid. In order to get there, this is the vision of the content community. The idea is the content store, and that's this little center of the hub where we keep all the content completely separate from the publishing platform, and it can travel. So the idea is that we can add infinite folks onto this wheel. An important distinction or an important point is that this is not necessarily all digital content. We can use this for marketing materials too. So we're talking about an organization-wide content management system. This is not just a web content management system. We create it once, it goes everywhere. We can have a whole team of authors contributing to this content store, and the idea is that it's all consistent in tone, and that it can go to various places. And it goes to these places by becoming intelligent content. So this is the crux of what this conversations in our community are. How do we create intelligent content? We have to piece up our content into, I keep saying the word content, I told you I'd say it a lot. We have to chunk it up into these bits. So we're adding structure to what we're putting out. The structure has to have meaning. So when you look at this diagram, the headline tag is a lot more informative than H1. Intro is more informative than H3. So we're looking at putting semantic meaning into our content to describe what it is we're looking at, so that eventually machines know what to do with it. The more structure we put into content, the more we can manipulate it. So if I want this topic about Picasso to go into mobile, and I only want to include the headline, the intro, and the call to action, I can grab those because I've structured it out and I've tagged it appropriately, and I know how to get that. So we're working on how to write to that in our community, and then how to get those tags across. So this is kind of the goal. The more structure we can have content, the freer it will become. The more data we put into the content, the more semantic information we have about it, the more machines know what to do with it, the more instruction we're giving out. So you can have your website go into your content store, identify the pieces that it needs, and your website's going to arrange component X, Y, and Z in the way that a website would. Your mobile site is going to go in, grab the components it needs, and arrange them in the way that it would. So these two, first structuring, then rearranging. So the really important thing here is that the content and the platforms are separate. And we have to keep talking about that because it is really an important distinction. So what NPR did in 2009 is they came out with their Create Once, Publish Everywhere initiative, COPE. And they kind of got this conversation rolling in the content community at large. This has been going on in the technical communications community for years and years and years. They've been talking about how to make this happen so that they don't have to keep rewriting the same chunks of content over and over, maintaining consistency across their documentation. Then NPR came in, and they said, all right, we have mobile sites and apps, and we have partner sites, and we have all these different places that we're putting content. We need to stop rewriting. This is costing us a lot of money because we're a new site, and we have a lot that we're putting out. So they decided what their primary content type was. They identified it as a news story, which is pretty straightforward for NPR. They broke that into chunks. They said, okay, a news story has a headline, it has a byline, it has the copy, and it has all these different other pieces to it. So then they put that into their content management system, and they completely stripped it of any code. They had no markup, no XML, nothing. Any code was dirty, and, which is really cute, reading their dirty content. Then they took their web publishing tools, they applied these filters to publish it. So they put out this really, really complicated graphic. Basically, what you have on the left side of this is you have your authors, and then they write stuff, they put it into the content management system, and it goes through all these really complicated things, and then they spit out their different sites, and that little cloud at the end is internet users who are so happy to get the content. So this was 2009. Our vernacular has evolved a bit since then, but Create Once, Publish Everywhere is kind of the benchmark that we're using to look at how this works. It's not perfect. So NPR today, this is how it kind of comes out. You have the exact same words, but sometimes there's some funky stuff, like inline text or inline links don't translate over to the mobile site. You can see Agnostic. There's one, it didn't make it over there. So there are some issues with completely stripping all code out and just having pure text or pure content. And that's why we're trending towards semantically rich rather than completely free of code. We're trending towards using XML to mark up our content. So the question that's probably running through your mind is, all right, content has been separated from display. Like, that's what content management systems do. And you're right, it's not dramatically different than what we have now. This is primarily a shift in authors' frame of reference. We have to think about how to write content in chunks. We have to think about how to migrate from a page mentality to more of a topic mentality. We have to think about how to manage content in a way that we never have before, because we always had brochures, and that had multiple pieces, and we had web pages, and those had multiple pieces, and now we're stripping down to this very granular level. And it's hard for authors. And the technology can do this. We know that the technology can do this, but it doesn't exist in a format that we can use right now. There is no content management system that completely divorces from display, that doesn't have any presentation layer involved in it, that has semantic tags built into the back end where we can go in and know immediately what to do with all this. Okay, I'm getting ahead of myself. But there's also a shift in the what we're asking people to think about when they think about content management systems. Because right now, that term is married to web publishing tool. Content management system means we're putting out a browser-based website in the current world. We're asking people to think differently about that, to change their mental model. So what I'm proposing needs to be made is a content management system that doesn't even bother to generate display at all. It's leaner, it's more scalable. It's purely focused on organizing content. And I know that sounds obvious because it's a content management system, but it's not that simple. We have to be able to create intelligent content. We have to be able to easily get those semantic tags in behind our content so that when we're writing a headline, we know we're writing a headline. When we're writing a description, we know we're writing a description, but we don't necessarily have to see those brackets. We don't have to finagle with the tags as authors. And, right, I guess it gets author friendly. So there's a joke that we make. CMS is the enterprise software that UX forgot. For folks whose primary concern is authoring content, most content management systems are not necessarily the easiest thing in the world to navigate. So I'm going to set up two employees thinking about who would use this content management system. They each have distinct needs. We have Jane and central marketing. So Jane has designed this content system for her company. She's planned the structure. She knows what channels she wants to reach, and she knows the workflow that she wants to. She knows what her people, the workflow that needs to go through. She needs to implement that through the CMS. She needs to put that information into the content management system so that Lisa, who is an out-based subject matter expert, can go in and talk about her content. And I'll come back to Jane later, but we're going to talk about Lisa right now. An author's primary goal is to get their information out. They know stuff about their subject, they know stuff about the company, and all they want to do is talk about it. So when they go into your content management system, they aren't going to have a lot of time or patience to be dealing with coding or metadata or funky presentation issues. They aren't going to want to mess around with technology. I'm not. So, Lisa needs to go into the content management system and see, oh, I know my information needs to go right here. Like, this is a form field, and I know how to fill it out because it clearly describes what it is. And all I need to do is type. I don't need to do anything funky. I just need to put the words to the screen. And if there are parameters, just make it clear. Oh, it can only be 200 characters. This is so simple, but somehow it's missing. And then she needs to have a really clear next step. So whether she's selecting editors or just hitting submit, her end process needs to be very obvious for her. So basically, we're talking about Lisa needs to see a form and to be able to put her stuff in it. So that was step one. Designing the author experience was the first step in creating a content management system, things that you guys can go out and do. The next step is designing the workflow. This is kind of a hairy question because, so you have your basic CMS workflow issues. This is going to be linear. Are you going to route to one editor at a time? How many times can you come back? Are you going to be able to route to multiple editors? This is common to content management systems. What's unique is the idea of when and how will display be previewable. So this is an interesting question. We're divorcing content management systems completely from display. There is still going to be the desire to see this output. So at what stage in the process are we going to allow or enable, and how are we going to enable that preview? Is it simply a matter of creating an opening for the publishing platform to reach in and say, oh, hi, this is what you'll see when you get to me? Or is it more complex than that? And the CMS that gets this right is going to win this. So this is going to be a really hairy thing, and this is going to be the hardest thing for people to get over, for authors to get past, for business leaders to get past, is this idea that we're going to create something and not be able to see it. So if you can figure that out, you're going to win this. The next step is hierarchies. This is a really hairy, this is probably the hairiest, okay, not the hairiest, because that preview is just pretty hairy. So this is a complicated thing for content management systems that are semantically rich. Okay. So we're coming back to Jane in central marketing. Jane has a content structure in mind, and she needs to develop that in CMS. So I don't know how much you all know about XML, but XML is a language that defines content, and rather so, like I showed you in that slide so many ago, the headline tag, writing out headline and writing out intro and writing out long descriptions, that's XML. It has meaning versus HTML markup, which would just is formatting centric. So the nice thing about XML is that it's customizable. You can create your own XML tags, and it communicates easily among different machines. And I know XML has kind of a bad rep among developers, and it's not a favored tool, but when it comes to defining content, it's really the best thing that we have right now. So I'm using it as the model. If you have a new, different idea, wonderful. This is the model that we have. So with XML, you get to, like I said, you get to define these tags. And Jane in central marketing is going to need to decide what those are. And she wants to go into the CMS and enter her own unique XML tags. Design a whole structure. There are different out-of-the-box structures already. There's a variety. There's DITA, Darwin Information Typing Architecture, is kind of the most commonly used. That's more for technical documentation. So DITA is a structure that exists that will define for you. It already has your primary content type as a topic, and you have these various components, and you could go in and you could fit your content to meet that structure. I think if we're designing a new CMS, it'd be really neat if there was an option for a user to go in and use an out-of-the-box structure. So they don't, not everybody is going to be ready to define their own XML format. They're going to want something that they can go in and say, okay, I need to fit my content to this. This is an opportunity. I mean, you could import one of these pre-established languages, or you could design something new. Content, how is it going to be in the content management system? So historically, CMS organizes content by site map. How things show up on the website is how it's going to look in the interface of the CMS. We don't need to do that or necessarily have the ability to do that. I mean, you could, but it's not going to be that intuitive anymore. This is something that could be customizable to each user, or it could be something that you could include when you're developing this content management system, a recommended structure for how to manage your content. And then the other interface question is, what needs to be viewable immediately when you go in? because there are so many facets to each of these pieces of content that we're talking about, do we need to know where it's used at a glance? Do we need to know who last edited it at a glance? And do we need to know, I don't know, anything else at a glance? Another sticky issue is related content. So as you start getting more complex, you have relationships among pieces. You might have a page about, or I'm still in page mentality. You might have a topic, Apple, and that bears relation to apple pie. How is that relationship going to live in the content management system? Is this going to be a taxonomy? Are they going to be organized in a parent-child relationship? Or is it going to be a note on the topic page, I guess, is the best way to say it, the topic form? How are those going to live with each other? The other thing is things that support your topic. Images, documents, videos. Where do those live in the content management system, and how do you draw the relationship? If I have an image that should, like if I have an image of a nice piping hot apple pie, how do I indicate in my content management system that these two things live together? And where are we storing that image? Derivative content. So in this utopian universe, we create content once, and it can move to any different place it wants to go. In the real world, we have occasions where content needs to be slightly different for certain scenarios. So the example that I have here is, let's say you're a nonprofit. You have your normal donate text. But you are also throwing an event, the volunteer extravaganza. And this audience doesn't respond well to your normal donate message, and you need to tweak it specifically to show up on this page. So you have a derivative piece of donate content, and it's specifically tagged for this. How does that live in the CMS? Do they share a parent-child relationship? How are you storing all of those pieces of derivative content? How are you keeping track of where one's used? If the parent gets edited, do you get any kind of notification that you also have these derivative pieces? So there are complications there. This doesn't necessarily fit into hierarchy, but it's something that's really interesting to think about. Content where the formatting is inherent. So things like bulleted and numbered lists, or tables. Can these pieces live in a format-free environment? Can they live in a display-free environment? Isn't there something inherent about the presentation layer? So this doodle was more about, can we break tables up into these fields and ask it to display differently in mobile and tablet, or not at all in mobile and tablet? Just a note. Going to storage. So the next step is figuring out how to interact with the platform publishing tools. This is kind of simple in that I believe the content management system should end at, we prepare the content, and then it's open. And the platform publishing tools can then do the work of coming in and grabbing it. But some other people might have different theories about this, and maybe you want to extend a little bit further into the platform presentation layer. How far do you go? How far do you enable that that interaction? Do we show sitemaps? Can you go into your mobile app and see how information is structured? Can you go in and see, all right, well, we've pulled X, Y, and Z topics, and this is what now your mobile app looks like. Do you want to do that in the CMS, or is that something that the platform publishing tool should handle? Regardless of how far you go, it should be distinctly separate from the content management. And and that's to keep this lean and scalable. Those are the two big themes, lean and scalable. And for the developers, step 5, you have to go and talk to people. We have to get authors involved in this process. You can't just go out and say, I think you want this. And there are plenty of people who would be just ecstatic to talk about it. I've got a company of people at Brain Traffic who, which I forgot to mention at the very beginning, is where I work, love to collaborate on something like this. Because this is a problem that's affecting all of us. It's affecting design, it's affecting UX, it's affecting content. But if we work together across disciplines, we can really get into this, and we can create something adaptive. We can create a system that can move and change with whatever the future is going to throw at us. And that's what I'm going to leave you on. So I'm going to share these slides later. There's some resources to learn more. And I'm going to open it up for discussion and questions.
So there's these things that you're looking for are missing in a lot of CMSs. What CMSs do you use that you're familiar with that you find these features lacking in?
Well, okay. I have some experience in a couple of custom content management systems, WordPress. I've done some reading about Drupal. I don't know of any content management system that is purely divorced from presentation at this point, or one that is usable and well known for authors. It's more of a lack of being there than necessarily a assertion that what's out there can't be. Because like I said, I mean, the technology is there. It's just, it's not present for us.
In your experience, is it that, and I don't know how many content management systems you've looked at and seen this might do it, but then it needs some developer to be involved to actually implement it. I mean, do you think it sort of falls down in how the CMS is designed, or is it that whenever there's a content management system that's implemented somewhere, the authors really aren't as part of the process as they should be, and so their needs aren't really met where it's ultimately be?
Yeah, there is definitely that. I think folks who are developing products often come up with weird business requirements that are created by people who are also not in contact with authors. And so the business requirements say make this, so you go make that, and it doesn't always make sense. I remember that there was a first part of your question, but I forgot.
Well, you just sort of, it was effectively that.
Right. So, I mean, you do have to bring the business leaders along. But if you're looking at creating something that can be used by everyone, an out-of-the-box tool that can be customized, your primary concern is not going to be these different businesses, leaders, and what their future requirements are going to be. Your primary concern is going to be making the most useful product that you can. And so if they go and screw it up, that's their business later. But if you give them this tool, then you've done the job. Right?
So you talked a lot about basically freeing the authors or team to have any sort of code or markup in what they're submitting. And this idea that NPR is viewing code as dirty,
Right.
and that it shouldn't be stored in sync with the content. But then you also showed an example where like an inline link didn't make it through from the desktop to the mobile site.
Right.
So, sidebars or images, it makes sense to hold those somewhere separate and say they're related. But for inline things like links, where's the natural fit for those to live?
I don't know. So, no. I'm not supposed to say I don't know. That's coached.
You're allowed.
So
don't
I'm
we
not
have a
saying.
solution for that? Isn't that what
Well,
HTML is? It's an operating markup language.
it's a markup language that's concerned with presentation format. So I'm saying that yes, we should have code that travels with the text or with the content, but authors shouldn't need to see it.
Okay,
So
an authoring environment is more like plain text is very simple, maybe simple markup
Right.
like synthesis.
Right.
But then editing environment somewhere else would editors come in like break inline links and do whatever else. Maybe?
yeah.
No, that's gotta reside with the author. You can't possibly depend on editors to know what inline links are appropriate.
No, I'm saying that if you have an inline link, and this gets into kind of the standards for how we're interacting with the web altogether, because really inline links are becoming less and less appropriate and awesome because of the way that we interact with mobile. So we are trying more often to get links at the end of text, so you can easily find it. So if you have a paragraph of text, and then, so this is your long description, and then underneath that you have your link component. So the author doesn't need to know that how the link is going to eventually assemble. They'll put the URL and what the text for the link should be, and that can live separately. We might have to gravitate away from inline links altogether.
I totally disagree. I absolutely disagree with that.
Okay.
The web is a hypertext medium.
Mm-hmm.
What makes hypertext is inline links. They have to be there.
That's fair.
Not necessarily true.
I'm gonna say a little. Okay, so are you familiar with Smart at all?
Yeah.
Okay. So technically speaking, you don't have to have everything embedded inside of your content. You can actually have ways to describe what you're trying to do and store it off as a separate thing. Content management systems, one thing I despise about them is the fact that the markup language is stored inside of the content itself, right?
And not in all CMSs, but okay.
Yeah, the majority. If you look at the majority of them, they're all stored within inside of it, right? If you look at it and you have all this content sitting inside of a CMS, and you have all this HTML embedded inside of it, it seems a lot easier if you just take the content and you actually move it out of the way, and then basically have some sort of layout that would basically just take that content and present it. Essentially, is kind of what she was talking, not so much actually embedding the actual links inside of it, but actually taking the content and displaying it with a layout format. So, I mean,
I absolutely agree with separating structure from content, or structure from markup. However, at a certain level of granularity, you're going to have to give the author some control. If I want this range of text emphasized, I should be able to do that. And the only way to do that, given what we have, the tools that we have now, is with markup.
I think you need to distinguish between semantic markup and HTML, formatting markup.
Mm-hmm.
Embedded HTML, yeah, that's not a good idea. But to have XML that you hide from the author, that's semantic markup, that says, this is a headline, this is an intro, if you have an inline link, put it there in your XML tag.
Yep.
As long as it's hidden from the author in the way they write it, you store that XML. The tagging is pretty simple, and it's easy to store in one piece. You've got the semantic markup with the content. Then you can use XSLT or whatever to get it into whatever formatting you want.
On the author's end, it could just look like what they do in Word and word processing programs now is just apply a style to a headline and style the body.
Yeah, I mean, these days, if you edit a blog, they have these GUI editors, and they put in HTML.
Yeah, it's format.
Right. But you could have the same kind of thing, put in XML. And I think that would be ideal. The whole thing about not storing any markup with your content. I don't think it doesn't seem reasonable to me. I think you need to store semantic markup with your content.
It's about metadata, right? I mean, that's what hyperlinks are. And the only reason they're stored inline in HTML is because that's all about presentation. From here to here, this is where I have a link. And as you pointed out, that could be stored anywhere. They did that in Google Wave. Even though you had links in the document, they basically had pointers stored elsewhere to the start and end point of where the link was. That's just what you do manually when you put it in HTML. So I feel like what you're actually asking for is more of a very versatile content store. And even though we're all talking about HTML and how this is kind of the same thing, some of your bullet points were exactly the kind of thing that Tim Berners-Lee was talking about. And he's still upset that we're not all publishers. It's not easy. So I feel like the problem is all the CMSs and even that term, it really is about storing the content, presenting the content, and because the web has been so dominant, that's what everything's built for. And now we're in the world of mobile, and we have to adapt. But I think the correct thing isn't to go and build CMSs that are for mobile, which is, I think, where the market is probably going to go if history, continues as it does. So I think you're right. This is more like a database. This is the back end, and I think that's the ideal place to separate these concerns of, workflow and all of that. Because having built several CMSs myself, when you couple the presentation with the content with the workflow, it is a mess. I mean, it is dirty, right? So
it's really dirty.
And I can see for your line of work, it's if you're really focused on the content, you really don't want to be encumbered by the presentation, and you can't do the presentation until you've got the content anyway.
And then we aren't
I think that'd be good.
We aren't asking a bunch of disparate authors to determine their own presentation either. We're asking a designer to say, in every instance that you have a headline, it's going to appear like this. In every instance that you have an intro, it's going to appear like this. And the author, who is not a designer, isn't going to make that decision. And they really shouldn't be.
It seems to me that this kind of already exists, doesn't it? Like in WordPress, you've got a chunk of data, which is the title. You've got a chunk, which is the content. You could have custom fields, which are other chunks. Maybe you've got a custom sidebar, which could just be a custom field. And then the theme determines all that.
The difference is that WordPress has an output that is a browser-based website. So when you're putting a title and text into WordPress, you're getting code mixed in there. And so then I'm talking about a further divorce from that. So that,
if the code is semantic and, sort of something that can be parsed, I mean, I don't see any reason why it couldn't be transformed into some other format as needed. So I guess, as long as your authoring tool restricts you to, semantic markup, I guess I'm not seeing what the problem is.
Well, because the code comes from the theme anyway. I mean, I've worked with WordPress, that's all I know, but in WordPress, it doesn't assign it any kind of, it's just, here's the copy, here's this chunk is all of your blog post or whatever. This chunk is the title. It doesn't put the markup all comes from your theme. So couldn't you just write
the markup that's surrounding the content of your post? But I think what we're concerned about, my understanding is how that content of the post is structured, right?
Right.
And so if I could jump in, the idea that, you get WordPress that you only restrict authors to semantic markup, I don't think that would quite meet your test because because WordPress is fundamentally designed to output HTML, because you do have a theme associated with the site, there is a default presentation you're going to see. You're going to have authors using semantic markup in non-semantic ways. Like, I like the way this looks, so hey, everything's an H3 now.
And then we still have this idea that we're creating a website and that anything that we need to change, we're mashing to be different. So yes, it can travel, but it's not going to answer the content problems the issues that we're facing in the content world.
One of the problems with larger CMSs, with enterprise level CMSs, And I'm thinking specifically about the Stellent system that the University of Minnesota used when I was there years ago, several years ago. And when the wheels fell off, and Stellent, which is owned by Oracle now, what it was specifically designed to do was give authors a place to dump content and don't worry about the presentation. The system will take care of it. Where the wheels fell off was when we started to argue about how many form fields do we need, what do they have to be named, what are they going to be used for, and I don't see that can be.
And that's why you need to work with authors.
Exactly.
Because that's what we're trained to answer those questions. So.
Well, we did. The university did bring the authors in a little bit too late in the process, but they did. Even the authors, we couldn't agree among ourselves.
Yeah, and then at that point, that's kind of a process issue. You have to have somebody who's authorized to make that decision and just move forward with it. So there will be, I mean, in any kind of project, especially where you're doing a mental shift, there's going to be those kinds of hiccups.
So where I work, we're working on exactly this problem. And the thing that I have trouble wrapping my head around is where's the business logic in all this fit? So in theory, you have, your content store, your model, with all the data and content stuff, and then you have your display over here, and there's a bunch of different things. But in between, there's something that drops it and figures out how to aggregate it, and it's a little different for mobile, and it's a little different for this, and sort of something that knows all of that. Are you writing all of that over and over again for each of those, and how do you manage all of that? And that's the $10,000 question on that.
Right. Well, and that's the goal of the content store, that you only write once.
Right, but where do you put those rules and logic? Is that in the content store, or is that in some other thing? Or who's editing those rules and logic?
Right, it's like what goes onto your mobile page versus what goes onto your main web page.
The designers and
your mobile page, you probably, I know when I use my phone, it's like, I want to find the place. So you want the location. You want to be able to bring up a map to be prominent in your mobile device, whereas if someone's looking at their home, looking on their computer, it's probably not the most prominent thing. So then that's information that you need to store somewhere. It's not the content, it's which content goes into which presentation.
Right.
I think that's what you were getting at.
Yeah.
And we'll work with some
And this is just, and maybe you already answered this, but you've got a number of resources at the end of your presentation. Is there sort of a community where people are discussing this? And so I develop these things, but I don't necessarily, a lot of the people that I work with don't necessarily articulate about the issues that they're facing, and so you and maybe some other people, it's good to figure out where it is that these people hang out.
Yeah, and I'm going to update the resources. I'm going to make it a little more thorough. It was kind of slow on my priority list, so I'll get that on and I'll tweet it out to the MinneBar hashtag when that's all done.
Content strategy, Google Groups too.
All right, well, thank you all.
Thank you.